The men were standing, rifle in hand, as though carved in stone, their eyes fixed on the ground in front of them. Now and then, by the light of a rocket, I saw the gleam of helmet after helmet, bayonet after bayonet, and I was filled with pride at commanding this handful of men that might very likely be pounded into the earth, but could not be conquered. It is in such moments that the human spirit triumphs over the mightiest demonstrations of material force. The fragile body, steeled by the will, stands up to the most terrific punishment. Greetings, legionaries. I am coming to you from behind enemy lines today. We have been transported through some sort of strange time vault, and I'm actually in an alternate reality where the Russian aristocracy was not defeated by the Bolsheviks, and during the Civil War, the White Russians actually won, but the battle is currently being fought, and I'm actually in a village near Minsk, and this is deep behind the lines of the Red Guard. I'm doing a covert mission for the great General Wrangel, and I must be quiet as any noise too loud will alert the the Red Guard lurking in the shadows. But Lance is somehow connected to my stream, despite the fact that we are separated by nearly 100 years. How are you doing, Lance?
I'm doing very good actually. The reason why is because you see, I've gone down to Agartha and they have these radio transmission thing that transmits time and through universes, and so I'm happy to help crush any commies, no matter the timeline, no matter the universe. So let's do it.
Indeed. And today, what we wanted to talk about was, first of all, a sort of diagnosis of a lot of the issues regarding the neurosis of the modern man. And apart from that, also just the general stagnancy, the lack of health and vitality, and then, of course, a solution. And I think in any historical period, what determines an epoch begins, of course, with the youth. So today, we're going to talk a lot about the youth of the past, today, and tomorrow, and specifically reviving a martial ethos in the youth. And do you have any opening thoughts, Lance?
Yeah, I think the reason why we talk about this, and I think why it's so important, is primarily that all your philosophies, all your thoughts, all those things, they're not things in themselves. They're just reflections of your body, right? And so, why is it that healthy thoughts always come to us in our youth? And why is it that it's the exception that old people have good and healthy thoughts, strong thoughts, right? So the reason why is because ultimately it's the physical body itself that projects strength. That is basically the meter, or the sounding bell through which nature pours itself out into reality. And so I think the reason why we got to talk about this is because when you are able to cultivate a strong youth, you're able to cultivate a strong future. That's just my opinion right there.
Yeah, and to echo off of that, in Twilight of the Idols, and this is paraphrasing Nietzsche, but he says something along the lines of the greatest philosophy lives in your own body. And of course, this is what we describe when we talk about an aesthetic philosophy, that ideas without the physical manifestation has no value. It is only through action that these things have value. But this is, of course, something we've talked about extensively. So we'll delve deeper into the implications of that. But generally speaking, it's sort of as you say, the youth have been replaced in the top rungs of a society. If you think about the the greatest extent of Hellenic power was Alexander the Great. And of course, he became king at what was it, like 22, Lance, I believe?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Yep. I think it
So,
was like 22, 23. It was
right.
something very, very young.
And even before that, maybe he was 18 already. He was already engaging in campaigns on behalf of his father, leading men into war. But there's this idea today that the youth have to be separated from the leadership and responsibilities at the top of society. So whereas in the past you would have young men leading other men into battle, like Alexander, he died at 32. He accomplished everything in his very illustrious life in 10 years, which is insane. But today, if you look at the top brass of our military, they're all old, decrepit, white-haired, gray-haired men. And
Yep.
these men no longer have
Quote
the
unquote
vitality.
men.
Right, some sort of strange variation of a bugman. But what they don't have is they don't have that youthful vigor. And something I talked about before was that a big issue, I think, with this, the fact that you have to be old essentially in the military, for example, to have any prominence, to have any responsibility, you lose that edge of a young individual with fire in them, the fire to want to have the will to try new things in terms of tactics, to change doctrines for the better. When you have what are essentially pencil pushers, because the modern military hierarchy, it's not greatness. It's not a great mind that gets you to the top. It's kissing ass, it's playing the political game, it's being a careerist. And the problem with this is a lot of our doctrines may grow stagnant. A lot of these guys, they do what they have to do to go up the ladder, and that's it. You're not rewarded for ingenuity, you're rewarded for complacency, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is, man, is that like it's a bureaucracy, and who does well in a bureaucracy historically? And you see this in the Mandarin system in ancient China, and you see this elsewhere in the Byzantine Empire. It's basically gelded eunuchs, right? It's worse than effeminate. It's basically, you know who the chief of staff of the Navy is. I don't even know what
Mhm.
that thing is. Don't even show me that freak. But that's what it is, right? That's what it breeds ultimately. Alexander the Great, you have to remember, like, even though obviously there's artistic liberty that's taken with the video or the movie, 2006 Alexander, which we all know and love, there's a truth to how it is that these young boys were raised, right? They were
Mm.
raised in the fields, they were raised riding horses, fighting, speaking philosophy, obviously doing their basics like such as mathematics and all this good stuff to get good at it, but also they were doing what young boys do, which is fight, and they, physical exercise and all this good stuff. And high office was accorded to he who had merit and who had obviously natural aristocracy. So that is to say, they were of body and mind, that aristocratic type. And so, that's the challenge of today, is basically how do we overcome this challenge posed to us? And this challenge is called the freaking bureaucrat question. Bureaucracy leads to all things decrepit and disgusting. So, how do we overcome it? Well, we overcome it through excellence, not just simply in the body, but in the mind and in the soul. And so, I think just kind of gives us a full circle as to what is the quintessence of a, you know, like what we espouse, right? What we espouse at its core is excellence. And excellence is only begotten when seeded young, when it is
Mm.
implanted you in your youth, when you were taught by your mother, for instance, that you were born to be a shining star, that you're born for great things. And with that, you're nurtured and you grow into this great person. It's not by accidents. I mean, obviously some people are just, just a power fuck example of how nature overcomes great odds, but how rare that is. What we intend to do, I hope that we can say we, is that we want to take the youth and give them the shock therapy of strength, so that way when they become
Yes.
old, they can, or rather not old, but 20 or 20 something, they can take this life by storm, by shock, and they
Yes.
can take it and make it their own.
And I love that film, by the way, the Alexander film. And I'm trying to remember the name of the director. Oliver Stone, I believe, directed it. And I recommend everyone watch I think it's called the Ultimate Cut or the Final Cut. But there's one specific cut of the film that's best. If you look around, best cut of Alexander film, you'll find it. But another sort of going back to that film was the scene where his father, Philip II, is taking the young Alexander through the caves underneath whatever Macedonian capital they had. I forget the name, maybe Pella or something like that.
Yep.
Anyway, but he's taking him through these caves, and on the caves are all the legends and myths of the Greeks painted on the walls. And Alexander remarks, Achilles, he was my favorite. And his father talks about how Achilles was destined to die young, but with great fame and great glory. And he asks Alexander, did he have a choice? And Alexander said, oh, yes, he did have a choice. And primarily the choice, and this is the choice that I think a lot of us are faced with today, and a choice which we are told to pick the wrong option, is the life of youthful victory, the life that may be short but filled with profound content, as Spangler puts it, or the old but mediocre life. See, Achilles is said to have been given a prophecy by his mother, who is also a goddess. And she said, if you don't go to Troy, if you stay here, and I believe Ithaca was the island, if I'm correct, or is
Yes, that's
that
right.
yes?
That's right.
So if you stay in Ithaca, you'll meet a good woman, and you'll have children, and you'll be happy, content. But what does that mean? You'll have a good life, but ultimately the impact you have on the greater world will be forgotten within a few generations. Or if you go to Troy, you will die there. You'll never come home, but you will be remembered forever. And it's this choice of the short life, which you could die at 32 like Alexander, or whatever age Achilles died at, which is pretty young, but have made a true impact on the world, have truly imprinted yourself on the fabric of history. Or you can choose the mediocre life where, I pay my taxes, I got my corporate job, I have my 401k, me and my missus are going to travel while our kids are in college, we're so happy. But you grow old, and your man tits begin to sag, and your hair gets old, and before long you can't really get out of bed. You piss
Oh
yourself
yeah,
10
you
times a day at
you
night.
get divorced with your wife takes all everything that you've earned your entire life. Your kids fucking hate you. You did nothing of worth. You sacrificed all your youth. You look like shit. Yep, that's awesome.
Right. But that's sort of the life, the boomer life. That's kind of the life that's being presented as the good option. Is like, no, no, no. You want to live a long time. You want to be secure and safe. You want to have your retirement benefits, blah blah blah. And I get it, right? People want to have a certain level of comfort. But when comfort becomes your god, you're no longer aspiring towards anything as a society. It's all very individualistic and very petty and very bourgeois. And in the beginning of Alexander, it's the opposite of that. It's a mythos where the choice is the young life, the great life, the victorious life. And I think part of reviving a military youth today is who the youth are told to look up to, and that comes from mythos. And of course, mythos is more real than actual life. I think that Ernst Junger said, it's not really myth, it's more of a prehistory that repeats itself throughout the ages. The story of Achilles repeats itself throughout history in Alexander and in many men afterwards, maybe in Napoleon even. Of course, Napoleon ends up a little bit older, but his greatest moments were in his youth, in the fires of his youth. This sort of story, this tragic story of great heights and then a tremendous defeat or death
Yep.
repeats itself. But when your myth is pointing to exceptional people who are willing to sacrifice every ounce of their being towards a higher purpose or a higher ideal, that is what you end up breeding and cultivating in the youth. But the problem today is that the heroes of the youth are not heroes that propel a society forward. There is no ethos of excellence and greatness. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, I mean, like, just to kind of carry on to that. So, what is this ethos? What does it mean necessarily? What are we trying to get at, right? Because for you, for you who are listening, all you've known all your life is effectively these kind of secular Christian ideals, right? And we all know Christianity is just this slave morality, and the slave morality is do good unto others, be a good guy, be selfless, just get, just be a good little boy and die silently, just be a good slave, and that's not at all what we're trying to teach you. We're trying to teach you or help you transcend this paradigm, right? And this paradigm that we're trying to give you, that will teach you, that will imbibe in your soul and you can feel in your gut, is this warrior ethos, which is this cult of honor, of courage, of the pursuit of excellence and fidelity to friends and so on. This is what we call actually the Homeric virtues, right? Or rather,
Yes.
I like calling it actually virtue in the
Yes.
Machiavellian sense to make a dichotomy between what the Christians have maligned virtue to be and what virtue truly is, right? To be virile and strong and manly. And so I guess the best way to kind of really sum up what we're trying to give the youth is how is it that you can approximate yourself to this warrior ethos young in the modern era, right? And the best way to do that is by Boy Scouts or the scouting movement. Now, for you, those of you listening, this is not like the normal Boy Scouts where it's like freaking Uncle Ted or whatever is feeling up your joint like behind the tent or something, you
Oh
know?
my God.
Yeah, no, 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 no. What this is like Vondervogel kind of stuff, right? This is like boxing and letting kids duke it out. It's only
Mm.
boys. It's instilling ethos of basically solidarity over being a goody goody two shoes, right? Because
Yes.
betrayal is worse than a crime, right? Because you can be a son of a bitch, but you'll be mine, right? So therefore, you can't touch him. This is my brother, right? And
Hmm.
so when you start imbibing this friendly, brotherly competition in the youth, it transforms and transfigurates itself as one ages into greater and higher aspirations. And you're able to perceive the world instead of seeing it through a lens of right or wrong, you see it through the lens of which is nature, by the way, of basically my will over others. This is a boxing match. It's not about right or wrong. It's whether I win or I lose. And only suckers think about whether it's right or wrong. Everything that causes my demise is wrong. Everything that causes my victory is good and right.
Hmm.
And so once you start imbibing this, then you start to understand what life can hold for you. It unlocks many corridors of happiness for you, right? And this is what they're desperately trying to suffocate in its youth. But maybe I go too far. But you go ahead and you
No,
tell
that
me.
that's very Jonathan Bowden pilled. I was watching a little TikTok clip the other day, which is essentially saying what you said, and I actually shared it in our group chat. But what a lot of people ask me, and what I've been getting a lot of recently, is people just asking, "Well, what do I do?" See, the thing is with you and I, Lance, we've been sort of involved in this general sphere for a little bit of time now, and I'm not sure. I'm sure it's the same for you. Before you came into the sphere, you read all the books. You knew all the content. That's how you got into the sphere. But a lot of people get in the sphere through
Yes.
something like a YouTube
Hit,
video. Hmm.
well, the
That was
History
a.
Channel sent me, by the way.
I,
No, I'm
I
just kidding.
I know what you're getting at, but what I'm trying to say is like a lot of people they get introduced through the sphere without the prerequisite knowledge. So in my mind, I know all the books to read. I know all the things to do because I did that before getting in this general sphere. But a lot of people, and it seems like the vast majority actually, just end up in the sphere through like YouTube videos or X or whatever. So they don't have the prerequisite knowledge and they come to me, they ask me, well, what do I do? And I think it's important that we touch up on that. And there's two different solutions. There's the individual solution and the collective solution. Our long-term project is a collective solution, is a new Boy Scouts, but without all the weird stuff. But for now, there's not a lot we can do before we have structure. That's what we're building. So in the meantime, it's important that we tell you, the individual listener, how can you how can you start to cultivate these good characteristics, these good qualities, so that when the time comes, you're prepared, right? And I just want to talk briefly about some of the things that I wrote earlier in my notes. So, first of all, I think it's incredibly important, the physical fitness aspect. So, a basic prerequisite is working out, right? Going to the gym. Every young man should have a gym membership, or every young man should be doing something to strengthen themselves physically.
Yep.
That goes without saying. And you do this so that you can more effectively do these other things that I'm going to mention. One of which is martial arts. Every young man should know how to fight. And not even for self-defense. Fuck self-defense. I've pretty much never had to use self-defense in my life. It's not about self-defense, it's about confidence essentially. knowing that you can handle yourself, you will avoid a lot more fights than if you actually don't know how to fight. And the reason why is because you don't have that insecurity of, oh no. A lot of times, insecurities actually leads to heightened aggression. So something that psychologists actually came to a conclusion of is that the ability, so like strong physical virtue, having a strong masculine, uh, like having higher testosterone, for example, actually leads to more peaceful and amicable interactions between men. And it's because you lack this insecurity of feeling at danger around other men. So the study came to the conclusion of that men with lower testosterone actually were more aggressive, were more violent, lashed out more. And I think it comes from this insecurity. So when you learn to fight, it's not really about self defense. You're probably going to be able to avoid way more fights because you know how to fight. Because when you end up in an interaction with somebody else, you don't have to prove yourself. You know you can fight, and you end up actually being a lot more peaceful of a person. And when I say peaceful, I don't mean that in the lame way, like, oh, I'm just gonna be peaceful. I mean that in you're self assured. You don't feel like you have to assert yourself. You assert yourself through different means. There's the insecure way of asserting yourself, and there's the secure way of asserting yourself. I think competition is a very secure way. But for example, sometimes you'll see some bouncer, and there's this tiny 5'5" drunk guy, and the bouncer just kicks the shit of a 5'5" drunk guy for actually accidentally bumping into him. And this to me is not the confident kind of security. The confident kind of security is what Nietzsche talks about in Ecce Homo, where he says, I pick the strongest adversary. I pick the toughest opponent. And Spengler talks about this as well. Spengler talks about the true hatred, and this is a sort of noble hatred. The noble hatred is between equals, between almost like peers. It's competition between two people that both have the ability to beat the other person. That's why they compete. And I think this is largely what you get from martial arts is you actually tend to become a better person. You don't become more violent, you become controlled violent. So you can be violent when you need to, but you actually become a more amicable person. You tend to go out of your way to help people. And when I say help people, Jonathan Bowden hits this on the head. The way we help people is not by coddling them. We help people by making them stronger. That's how you help somebody. That's what I mean with be a friendly guy, be a nice person. It's not being nice like coddling somebody and just treating them like this sensitive little egg, right? That might crack. It's tough love. It's paternal love. It's brotherhood. You
Yep.
wrestle with your brothers. You even fight with your father sometimes. That's what life is about. That's cultivating that masculine virtue. It's not in treating them like this little sunflower. So when I talk about amicability and fraternal brotherhood and friendship and being a nice guy, what I mean by that is be a nice person by making somebody better. And you don't make somebody better by treating them uh, sensitively. You do it by building them up. And this is what you get through martial arts. You literally get your ass kicked for the first 3 months. You go into the jujitsu mats, and I know you can relate to this, Lance. You just get your ass kicked month after month after month. You're like, what the fuck? But then finally, you find one person. Maybe he's the newcomer, right? You start beating one person, and you start beating two people, and then you start beating three people, and you go on and on and on. And there's this hierarchy. It's almost like a rank structure of abilities. So martial arts is incredible for your psychology, I think, and I think it makes you a better person, a better individual, a better friend, all these different things because it gives you this confidence to know you can deal with situations. But when you assert yourself, you do it because you want to prove to yourself your own strength by picking high competition, not by kicking the crippled monkey, you know?
Yep.
Um, and I've gone on a little bit, so I'll just very quickly go over the last few things that I think you as an individual have to seek. And that's the military arts. And that includes not only understanding the basic skills necessary to function within a military setting. That could be drill. Maybe some people think that's outdated. That could be learning how to read a map, land navigation. I suck at land navigation. That's something I have to get better at. You know, uh, something as simple as just understanding basic things like the just rucking, right? Knowing how to ruck, that's a different kind of physical fitness. I guarantee you, you find an average bodybuilder, they will not be able to ruck well if they've never done it before. But that's a necessary part of being in the military setting. Riflemanship, knowing how to fire a gun. That's a very like micro scale level. And then having a trade or skill. See, the military is run primarily because you have a lot of people doing specializing in different things, even within an infantry unit. You have your machine gunners. You have previously you had assaultmen. You have the team leader. You have combat engineers. You have corpsmen. You have all these people that have a specific skill that they contribute. You have to specialize. So you yourself, as a legionary, have to specialize in something. Maybe you're good at fixing cars. Perfect. When the legion's Humvees aren't working, guess who we're going to call? You
Yeah,
know.
that's right.
Um, and the last thing is an intellectual pursuit, and that's when it goes into people ask me, well, what do I read? And I think we can touch up on that a little bit, Lance. But you have to you have to the reason why you have to pursue the intellectual side isn't because you want to become this spurgy word cell. It's so you can ensure you're fighting for the right thing. It's so you can ensure that the manifestation of the goodwill within you comes out correctly. Because the will to power can come out in bad ways if you don't understand yourself. And I think truly what reading should be isn't necessarily learning, but learning how to verbalize the things you feel deep inside. And then you start to read these things and you think, wait, I felt this whole time, I just didn't understand how to manifest it. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate what warrior philosopher just said, right? So start off with martial arts, start off with lifting. Those two things are accessible to everyone. Three, I understand some of you are old. Some of you might have some kind of physical ailment. Others of you may just for whatever reason can't get into the military. That's fine. But choose to, if you can, if you're still of age, do so. Even if it's for the minimum term, it's going to give you unlock parts of your brain that you wouldn't be able to access otherwise. Okay. Finally, and this is absolutely essential. I understand that many of you are not, maybe might not be interested in doing a whole warrior lifestyle your entire life. Maybe that's just not your thing. That's okay. But the foundation should be always, right? So, what does that mean necessarily? So, you need to know at least the basics and keep up at least a regimen of physical fitness. So, cardio, physical, like anaerobic, excuse me, as well as, yeah, anabolic, and also freaking, mixed martial arts of some kind, even it's jujitsu, right? Because it's like chess for your body. But also, you should be devoting yourself beyond simply your trade. Everyone has a different trade. My trade is different from yours, and when we all come together, remember that war is the ultimate crescendo of life because it draws on every single, I guess, vocation into its machine, right? So you
Yes.
have hackers, you have mechanics, you have from your grunt all the way to your general who's good at leadership. You have to be cultivating everything. And so you want to be an asset. But what I'm trying to get at is that beyond that, I would highly recommend that you read books which make you spiritually, quote unquote. What I mean to say is you cultivate your will to start dreaming about these things. You start only thinking in terms of victory. It strengthens you. It buttresses you, right? Because it's I understand from your perspective you may know of a thing, but you have to like brainwash yourself, which is precisely why I do two things, right? I refuse to watch things that make me weak, right? I don't watch anything that has any brain, bullshit that's commie bullshit. I only watch things that make me strong. So when I was a kid, I'd watch like Troy 3,000 times over. You know why? Because I don't even just want to like know what they say. I want to like live in it. I want it to be part of myself, right?
Hmm.
If you can think of your brain, think of it as a tapestry. You know how like women, when the fates, the ancient Greeks, they would have a loom and they would hold into it fibers, and they'd weave into it fibers and basically do the whole carpet or whatever the fuck. That's how your brain is basically. So you have to consistently be feeding it fibers of strength for the whole tapestry of your body to become strength. You can't just do it once and think you have it. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? And
Yes.
so, what I would recommend is this, and this is probably the most eye-opening for me: is you read Nietzsche. I mean, that's just the basic, right? Read
Yes.
Beyond Good and Evil, whatever. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is probably the best one, most accessible for you. But you have to read things that come from people who are writing strongly, right? People that are writing with
Right with
strength.
fire, yes.
Exactly. So either it's Conan the Barbarian, as silly that as that might sound, or Starship Troopers, to basically anything that Ernst Jünger writes, or listen
Yes.
to us, right? We refuse to give you any bullshit, right? We only want to give you strength, whether it's mental strength, physical strength, spiritual strength. But ultimately, you legionary who's listening, it comes down to three things: always be physically fit, always be mentally tough, always be spiritually devoted, and always be honing those three things constantly. In your day, if you have nothing to do, if you're sitting on your ass watching TV, you're wrong. You should be doing these three things, and I promise you, you'll be a successful person.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to quote an excellent line from A Storm of Steel. But before I say that line, I want to sort of give you a background of why I picked this specific quote. You mentioned the division of specialization, that everybody has a role towards the military machine. And in this machine, we start to become a part of almost a spiritual entity that is larger than any one soldier or warrior or marine on their own. It becomes larger, it becomes greater. And of course, both you and I can't stand Hegelians, but both of us have alluded to this. The one thing that Hegel talks about, or one of the few things that Hegel talks about of value, is this idea of a singular entity comprised of many individual parts that begins to embrace a spiritual characteristic of its own. So he talks about the state as a spiritual entity. Well, I want to talk about the army, the legion. No, fuck the army, the legion as a
Right.
spiritual entity. And the whole point in the military, why you cut your hair, why you wear uniforms, why you march in formation, why you do drill, why you have a rank structure, why you get mass punishment and get hazed when you fuck up, why everyone does, is because they want you to begin to feel like you are a part of the greater whole.
Mhm.
Which is why I love this quote here. The men were standing, rifle in hand, as though carved in stone, their eyes fixed on the ground in front of them. Now and then, by the light of a rocket, I saw the gleam of helmet after helmet, bayonet after bayonet, and I was filled with pride at commanding this handful of men that might very likely be pounded into the earth, but could not be conquered. It is in such moments that the human spirit triumphs over the mightiest demonstrations of material force. The fragile body, steeled by the will, stands up to the most terrific punishment. And what you begin to notice here is the imagery of one solid mass of steel helmets. When your comrade to the right is shot in the shoulder, you feel it too, like a phantom limb. You begin to feel the pain of each individual in the group because you are as much a part of them as they are a part of you, because you together have become one living, breathing, burning fire of spirit. And this is the whole idea with ethos. Ethos is built so that you can become a part of something bigger and higher than yourself. So when we tell you to read things like Beyond Good and Evil, for instance, it's sort of the attempt at Nietzsche, and unfortunately, because of his illness, he was never able to truly write Will to Power. It ends up becoming a collection of essays, but it was originally intended to be a transvaluation of all morality. And perhaps we would have even gotten an actual organized form to Nietzsche's ideas and his morality. But that's what with Beyond Good and Evil, it's reasserting morality not as this sort of as Lance would describe this sort of Christianization of morality. It's power. What is good is what makes me powerful. What is bad is what makes me weak, rather than this sort of dogmatic view of morality that you get with Platonists and Kantians, etc. So you read Beyond Good and Evil, so then you begin to understand, well, what is truly good? You read books like The Prince to understand human psychology to a great degree. You read books like Storm of Steel, which I've just read an excerpt from, so that you see the attitude necessary to make it through such brutal events such as World War One. You read Sun and Steel by Yukio Mishima to understand how you as an individual cultivate that ethos. You read Metaphysics of War or Handbook for the Right Wing Youth by Julius Evola. You read Man and Technics. These are all good, great books that I would like to recommend to the legionaries because they're also a lot of these books I mentioned are quite short and they're quite accessible. And you
That's
have to
right.
start somewhere. But yeah,
I think
that's
one thing I would tell you is this, and it starts with stop being an individual, right? It's just exactly what he alluded to. When you're a legionary, you're part of a legion. You're a part of one will. You're a finger in a fucking fist, right? And so ultimately, you stop caring about whether you live or you die because ultimately, who are you? The thing, the legion doesn't die. A legionary might fall, but he is arisen again in his brother or in his son, right? And these are all brothers and sons in arms. So that's to say, I'm not saying filial like by blood. I'm saying, for instance, when a sergeant brings up a private and that private is recruited and obviously, promoted and then becomes a sergeant, and then that sergeant takes a bullet in the face, well, that sergeant never died, right? Because ultimately the legion never dies. And so that's the most important thing you have to understand to overcome this effeminate liberalism of our day is individualism is the enemy, right? And I don't mean it in the communist sense. I mean it in the sense that your personal vocations, your personal needs don't mean anything. And you're strong when you're together. And do you know why individualism is weak? Because the best maxim for war to destroy your enemy is to divide and conquer, right? And who is more divided and more conquered, more totally, absolutely sent under the yoke than the absolute atomic individual? And therefore, when you cease to be an individual and start to become part of one warrior will, the one here at the Legion, you start to become something greater than yourself. That's all I have to say right there.
absolutely. And I think what is so pertinent about this topic is how quickly we sort of went through all of it. It's very simple. It's not complex what we're talking about. This is a very simple thing. It's very straightforward. So
Mm-hmm.
what I ask people is because this is straightforward and this is palatable, use this. Use this to some of you are in a good position right now. And I say, if you, here's the thing, right? If you yourself are not yet in the position where you are called to action that you cannot act yet, then get there. Get to that threshold, get to that position. But if you are at that position already, help your brothers out. Help other people reach that too. That's why I'm saying about tough love, paternal love, what Bowden talks about as being let's forget your current interpretation of kindness. Let's take the Bowden interpretation that truly being good to people is by making them stronger, is by uplifting them. And I know, Lance, that you don't like the Christian scriptures, but there is one good line that I'd like to mention, and that's of course the sermon where Jesus is talking about the bread and the fish, and he says, "Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, and he'll fish for a lifetime." The problem with Marxism and all these different things is that they just want like these people that support these ideologies, they just want you to give them the fish. But the problem is they're going to come back the next day asking for another fish and another fish and another fish. What we are giving you is the rod. We're giving you the fishing rod.
That's right,
and
but
and
we're
we're
also
giving you
giving you the discipline. We're giving you the
yes.
Pugio, right? The centurion's
Yes.
rod. And no, and if you don't mind me just stealing the mic here a little bit, the
Mhm.
idea is to build you up, is to basically not simply, as you can see, just as freaking Warrior said, it's simple. And life is pretty simple at the end of the day. But what is difficult is actually doing it. What's difficult is actually making sure you do it every day. It's like going to the gym, right?
Yeah.
You don't just go to the gym once and you're jacked forever. What you do is you go to the gym every day. And so when you talk about the warrior ethos, or when you talk about, the warrior vocation, or when you actually hone it, right? For instance, physical fitness, or whether it's actually, going on Lance's Legion, for instance, and studying how to do leadership or how to do a certain technique of platoon maneuver or whatever. It's not just one and done. You do it over and over and over and over and over again until you get so freaking bored, and then you do it again. And so at the end of the day, it's about making sure that it becomes intrinsic as a part of you, almost unconscious. And that's when you know that you're a warrior, when your instincts are aligned with those things that you hold dear in your heart, what you idolize, right? And that only comes to you after a lifetime of consistently reinforcing these feelings and these ideals by practice, by action, by meditation, and by training it into your body. So I mean, that's really all I have to say. What do you have to say, sir?
Yes, the last things I'll leave you with is we're giving you the individual, as an individual, what you can do to reach the ideal. But this is just the beginning.
That's right.
Ultimately, for lasting change, we need a collective effort of this creation of a new ethos. And what I intend to do is I want something better than the Boy Scouts ever was before. I want a true cultivation of the youth, and that goes all the way down to education. Let's teach the Homeric epics. Let's teach the poetic Eddas. We have to cultivate an ethos which does two things. It breeds camaraderie, fraternal camaraderie, and it builds excellence. See, we're not we don't believe like our distinction of our collectivism is that we want collective excellence. We don't want collectivism to bring everyone down to a low level. We want it to bring everyone as high as possible. It's I want to help my brother out because if he becomes better, then I must become better too. It's this good competition. This what's the word you always use? It's one of your
Agonism.
yes, exactly. Agonia, right? Is that
Yep.
agonia?
Agonia. Yeah. Yep.
Agonia.
Yep.
That's what we want to foster and create and cultivate, and you can help us do that. So first, make yourself into that person, and then after that, make other people into that too. And eventually, it's this chain reaction of vitality and excellence and exceptionalism, and that's how we want. That's forget kindness. Good. This is how we're good to people. You are good to people by teaching them how to fish. You're good to people by making them stronger, by making them accountable. Don't give them the solution. Teach them how to answer the problem every single time. That's what a good teacher does, and that's what we're going to do. And that's
And by
that's all I have
being
to
that
say.
example, being that leader, being by that example every day. Because here's the thing: through the TV, through your peers, through excuse me, peers. These people are not even peers; they're not even people. But what I'm saying is, through pressure, these individuals always want to bring you down. They want to sully your brain, sully your soul. They want to make you less. They want to defang you and declaw you, right? That's the term. Well, at the end of the day, it's up to you in the face of everything to be that example of physical fitness, of mental toughness, of spiritual devotion, and by your example, lead others to that water and let them drink, but show them how, right? But don't freaking baby food or baby spoon that stuff to them. Make them read, make them physically exercise, hold them to accountability, have instill in them the virtue of self-discipline. Further, if you still need direction, that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we've devoted our entire lives. It's not even an exaggeration, our entire friggin' lives to this. So follow us, listen to
Precisely.
us, and act with us. Thank you.
And just to end off this thing, I just want to shout out the Patreon supporters. I want to shout out to Sean and Ursendo Mayorga. Thank you so much for your guys' contribution. It may not seem like much, but it really means a lot and helps me get closer to putting more and more time and effort into this. But as always, thank you everyone for listening. And this is the Warrior Philosopher, building the foundations of the Warrior Philosophy. We'll see you next time.